Hi, I'm going to tell you a story. Probably the most important story you've ever heard in regards to money. Your money, and the abundance of it or the lack of it. But first, let me share with you who I am. My name is Bracken, and I'm standing in front of my home called Xanadu of Sedona in Sedona, Arizona. And this story goes back 22 years of where I learned the concept of unconditional cash. And why is this story important? Because if you haven't noticed, the world has economic problems. You have economic problems. I have economic problems. But this story, which is most important to you, to me, and to the whole economic system of the world, is going to share with you how those problems can be solved. Not just temporarily, but long term. I'm going to share with you today my story of how I learned unconditional cash. I've got to go back to 1988, back in time to April in 1988, where I was in the Columbia River Gorge up next to Hood River, Oregon, and I was with a friend. I was flat broke, had no money, had just had a catastrophe in my life months before, and I spent 6 months there, no job, living with this friend of mine named Jim, a landscape architect, who was generous enough to allow me to have a bedroom and told me you can eat anything in the house, but there was never anything in the house except some eggs, some bread, and usually some cheese and crackers. So I spent that 6 months studying, reading religious texts, meditating, praying, seeking my spiritual path, trying to find out how I could go back into the real world, be a spiritual being, and make my way. After 6 months, I thought I was ready. I thought, okay, I've got it down pat now. So I'm going back to Dallas, Texas, where I came from, and go back to work. Well, as things would have it, someone said, you've got to go through Sedona, Arizona. It is wonderful. It is fantastic. You've got to see it. So on my way back, I said, okay, it's right on my path. So I pulled into Sedona, Arizona at midnight, May 1st. It was a sleepy little town. The streets were rolled up, and I said, what is the big deal about this town? I'd never heard of it. I'd never seen it. I said, what's the big deal? So that night, in my old clunker car, my 1976 Cougar, and this is 1988, I went to sleep in the back of the car. Lo and behold, I woke up the next morning, and I was amazed. I saw the beauty of the red rocks, the beauty of this town, the energy, the people that were all out and about. And I set out that day with $40 in my pocket and made my mind up, I'm never leaving this town. I don't care what happens. God's promised to supply, I'm going to trust God. So the first night I went and slept in Boynton Canyon in the back of my car. And the second night, and the third night. And during those days, I hiked, I met people, I went to vegetarian restaurants. I had a lot of fun. The third night, I woke up in the middle of the night, and I smelled smoke. And everything I owned was in the trunk of my car. And I said, what is going on? I got out, I opened the trunk, and it was on fire, burning up everything I owned. I drove from Boynton Canyon to a vegetarian restaurant called Food Among the Flowers. I took their hose and I sprayed down my trunk. Everything I owned was gone. All my clothes, all my belongings, everything I had in life. And I said, okay, God, this means only one thing. I'm not sleeping in the car anymore. Luckily, I had my sleeping bag in the back seat of the car and it didn't burn up. So the next night, I started sleeping in Boynton Canyon at a very special place. And I made my mind up, talking with God inside here and God out here, that I was going to stay in Sedona and I was not going to get a job. Every religious text, every metaphysical book, everything I had studied for 6 months and in my entire life had promised that if you love God in here and God out here, that He would supply everything. All your needs, all your desires. So God and I talked and I said, that's got to include money, and I'm not getting a job. People thought I was crazy. I was walking around, I had a white pair of blue jeans and couple of nice shirts that were in the back seat, even though everything else burned up. And I was walking around because I didn't have any gas for my car. People would come up to me and say, "Hey, why are you so happy? What's your name?" I'd say, "My name's Bracken, and I got here 4 or 5 days ago, or a week ago, or 2 weeks, or whatever the case was." And they'd say, "Hey, I want to buy you lunch. I want to know why you're so happy." And I shared with them why I was so happy. Because I had found God, the Spirit, the peace, the happiness inside here. I spent 7 weeks sleeping in the desert. I slept on Bell Rock, I slept in Cathedral, I slept in Boynton Canyon. I slept all over the place. And back then, the forestry didn't mind you camping out anywhere you wanted to. So I told everybody, everywhere I go is my bedroom. People started walking up to me on the streets or at restaurants and saying, "I want to give you some money." I said, "What is this all about? You want to give me some money?" They'd hand me a 10 or they'd hand me a 20. Some even gave me a 50. Or even once I got 100. And I said, "What's this about?" And I started meditating and praying about it. And it came to me that these people were giving me money out of the goodness of their heart, from their heart. They were giving it to me unconditional. They were applying unconditional love to money, to cash. So I started calling it unconditional cash. I was having a blast. People would say, "Why are you so happy?" Because I sleep out here in the bedroom, any bedroom. The whole desert is my bedroom and my sleeping bag. And I meet people, I meet wonderful beings, I get meditation, I get sleep, I have peace of mind, and I'm happy. And it seems like a lot of people just want to give me money. And I call that unconditional cash. Lo and behold, and this is good, over 9 months, I went from the desert after 7 weeks sleeping into a little trailer, and from the trailer, rented a computer, and I started talking about the concept of unconditional cash. Well, people were giving it to me. Then somebody came along and said, "Here, I want to give you $1,000. And I said, "Wow, this is a lot of money. You just want to give it to me?" And they said, "Yes. You're so happy. You're so peaceful. You're so wonderful to be around. I want to give you $1,000. I said, "Okay, what am I supposed to do with this concept?" Then it came to me. I'm supposed to pass it on. So I took $500 or $600 of that $1,000, and I found somebody who had a project or had a dream, or somebody who wanted to improve their life, that was happy, that maybe they had money, maybe they didn't. But when my heart inside here said, "Give this person money." So out of the first $1,000 bill, so to speak, I gave 500 of it away. And the person was overjoyed. And still I hadn't got the whole scenario, what this was all about. But then, lo and behold, and I'm going to keep this story a little shorter and not all the details, but then 5,000 or 3,000 or 10,000. So I started giving 2/3 of it away, calling it unconditional cash, to people that I got from my heart I should give it to. No strings attached. You go do whatever you want to with this money. You improve your life, you back your project, whatever you feel like doing. It's unconditional cash, and I bless it with unconditional love when I give it to you. Well, boy, let me tell you, you start giving money away and the word spreads fast. People started coming. And yes, I started having to tell a lot of people no, that I wouldn't, because I didn't feel it in here. It didn't feel right. But I also gave a lot of it away. To keep a long story short, from arriving in Sedona, Arizona, sleeping 7 weeks in the desert, spending 9 months, I wound up backing, with unconditional cash, a conference at Boynton Canyon at Enchantment Resort called Campaign for the Earth. I paid for 129 leaders, environmental leaders, Dennis Weaver, Klaus Nobel, Barbara Marx Hubbard, the head of Global Family. The list went on. I paid their room, their food, and everything to do a conference called Campaign for the Earth. It was a wonderful being's dream to do this conference that I met at the Whole Life Expo. And by that time, so much money had come forth unconditionally to me, and I had given anywhere from 60% to two-thirds of it away unconditionally and was living on the rest, that I was beginning to be semi-famous. And someone came and said, this is my dream, to do Campaign for the Earth. So at the end of that conference, with 129 leaders in Boynton Canyon and Enchantment Resort, I presented the concept of unconditional cash. Only 6 to 7% of them got the concept. Most of them said, we can't give money away. We can't not have strings. We've got to make it an investment. We've got to guide these people if we give $10, $50, $100,000 away for a project that will help planet Earth. And I told them, no, you don't. And I made a speech. And in that speech, at the end of the conference, everyone was in tears. But still, only 5 or 6% got it in here and up here. And at that time, because during the process, and I've got to add this to the story, because this is the most important thing that happened to me in my entire life. Got to back up a little bit. I was in Santa Monica, California, and a psychic that I had met at the Whole Life Expo named Linda Lawrence invited me to her home, and she gathered some people with money for me to present them giving me money, unconditional cash. Simultaneously, she told this young woman, beautiful goddess, her name was Nina Joy, that I was a man giving away unconditional cash. So she came to this social gathering. She got out of her little red car, walked up in her pink silk pantsuit, and sat down at the picnic table across from me, and I looked in her eyes and I said, this is the goddess that I want to be with for the rest of my life and beyond. In fact, I told her, I want to be with you for 1,000,000 years. That's where I met Nina Joy. And at the end of the Campaign for the Earth conference, we had already conceived our first daughter, and she was 5.5 months pregnant. Because the people at the conference and the percentage was so low to get unconditional cash, like unconditional love, from the heart to back projects, dreams, or other people's desires even. They couldn't get it. I said, look, we're having a baby. Let's go to Maui, Hawaii, and have our first child. And that's a whole nother story. And this is 22 years later, with miracle after miracle after miracle. 3 daughters, homeschooling them, every one of them water birth at home with a midwife. And here we are in Xanadu of Sedona, in Sedona, Arizona. One more thing I'd like to say, and then I'll conclude this story. Unconditional cash works. And I'm going to explain more about that in the next video, and you won't want to miss it. It works. It will change your economic life. It will change the person you give it to's economic life. And the more you give, the more that comes back around to you. As the old saying goes, what goes around comes around, and it comes around multiplied. So there's my brief short story of how I discovered unconditional cash. And in the next video, I'll explain to you in detail exactly how it works. So blessings to you, and may love from my heart to your heart bless us both. Thanks.